so I said this at the end of last time that I would look these up really quick in between our filming. So I just wanted to put these up. Now, I actually expect all of these to change here really quickly. But this is what they were. I think they said as of Thursday. So as of Thursday, the federal funds rate was just over 1%. The discount rate was at 0.25. And the treasury bonds, so the government bonds we were talking about buying, the 10-year one was at 1.1%. You actually can buy them in like multiple different years, where the ones that are shorter term pay less, longer term pay a little bit more. So I believe that the 3-year one is currently at 0, which isn't great. The 30-year one's at 1.74%. So I just thought I'd put those up. Now I expect both, for sure the federal funds rate, I don't know about the discount rate, but I expect this federal funds rate to start getting pushed down because of, going back to what we were talking about last time, quantitative easing. So at the end of class last time, I mentioned, that quantitative easing, right, buying these massive mortgages. Well, we just had one. So in response to coronavirus and the effectively the kind of the pausing of our economy, if you will, right now, the Federal Reserve has made a massive influx of money supply with the idea of trying to get, again, those transactions rolling again. Right now, transactions are really slow, and if if you work in now if you work in St. Louis, you're not working because of the stay-at-home order. So we're seeing a lot of slow to transactions. So the Federal Reserve actually engaged in a round of quantitative easing on Thursday afternoon. They effectively put $700 billion into the economy in one swoop. So if we go back, this is the same graph, by the way. This is the last graph that you should have in your notes. This is what we were working on at the end of last class, right? So if we look at these, R1, R2, R3, Q1, Q2, and then Q3, right? Remember I said these were all kind of bond purchases. Well, what just happened? I probably, scale's not great here. I'd probably have to go further out. The Federal Reserve effectively just did a round of quantitative easing, which really pushed that interest rate a lot of money at once. Maybe not quite 0, but really close to 0. So that's why I said I wouldn't be surprised if we'll start seeing some decline in some of the other interest rates as well. This was our quantitative easing. And then I put down here, right, 2006 through 15, because this is true. This is what 2006 through 15 looked like. There was a lot of bond buying. There was effectively 3 rounds of quantitative easing. Some people at the Federal Reserve might argue on the 3rd round, and they kind of say, oh, it wasn't. It was. So there were effectively 3 rounds of quantitative easing through that time period, as well as massive bond buying. And this is what we've seen really, I guess, since the very end of 2019 until recent, is just a lot of idea from the Federal Reserve of putting money into society. Of getting more and more money out there. So lots of bond buying, and then again the big culmination, the $700 billion infusion on Thursday, which is going to start hitting those transactional markets. Probably when they open up on Monday, you'll start seeing kind of the impacts on the interest rate. So it kind of looks very similar. Quantitative easing in terms of a graphing purposes, it only is one thing, and it's always one thing. It is always a money supply increase. So there, we don't have to worry about, is it this, it's only money supply increase. Just a quick kind of note for your graph purposes. If I want you to graph me quantitative easing, we can kind of always go with our graphs, how we kind of like things in the middle, and here to here, totally fine. You do not have to go like, oh, well, I have to start low and then push it even lower. Don't worry about that. I don't care about scale or end results. I just want the impact, downward push in the interest rate and increase in the quantity of M2. Okay, so like I said, that I put that in the short run changes. It's actually very uncommon. We don't typically see quantitative easing used as monetary policy. If you think about it, they kind of refer to the one on Thursday as QE5. only the 5th time that they've used it since really it became kind of a variable that was something that was tracked, a monetary policy tool. So it's not very frequent, but the impact is real immediate, and that's why I put it in the short run changes. We expect to see that money supply change relatively fast. Okay, so that kind of knocks out the Federal Reserve, how they can change the money supply. I want to do one thing here, and this is kind of a twist. I want to start thinking about the impact of this, and there's some math that we're going to have to pull out. And it kind of just ties to the idea that we know that if we increase money supply, we should be able to capture inflation. And if we think about inflation, we said that inflation was a change in the level of price, or price change. Now remember, we called this a money market. And again, that key term market means we have to kind of follow that law of supply and demand impact in our graph. And right, we have P and Q as our variable. Now in our money market, we said, let's look at P as the price of money, or the interest rate. But what if we used a money market that looked at P instead of an interest rate, just in terms of a price level? We actually can make this alteration to the money market. This is not a formal name, by the way. The formal name of this is still the money market. I just hate that because then it's like we're changing what we're doing. And you guys as students are just supposed to read people's minds as to know which ones to use. So I don't like that. So I kind of give it an ad hoc name. I call this one the value of money model. It is still using the money market as a base build, which means that the interior of the graph is still going to be identical. We're still going to have this downward sloping money demand. We're still going to have this vertical money supply. We're even still going to use the same quantity, right? This is still going to measure the quantity of M2. What's going to be different is what's going on over here. Right? All we know is we have to have, if it's a market model, it has to somehow be a price measure. Instead of using the interest rate, however, I want to use the price level. So that's kind of what we want to do. So we want to use the money market to show value. Okay, so they actually do have a variable for value. They typically use the variable VM. We'll have a variable later this hour for velocity, which uses V. So I know it's a little confusing. So I just kind of tend to write out value just to make it a little bit simpler. So I want to kind of track value, right? So how do I want to measure this? So let's kind of build just a silly little kind of chart here. Let's just hypothetically say that you have $1 and that initially a loaf of bread sells for $1. Again, just kind of initially, which means I can kind of chart this out, price, value. And if the price is $1, the value of my $1 that I have is exchangeable for one loaf. What if price changes? What if price goes to $2? So you'll notice we have inflation, right? General level of price. Prices went up. If price goes to $2, I have $1. Can I buy a whole loaf? I cannot. Let's, for simplicity, actually they do sell half loaves of bread. I've seen them in the store. But let's just say for simplicity, we can just straight up get a half a loaf of bread at any time. I would get half a loaf. What if price doubled again? to $4. I have $1. I would only be able to get a fourth of that loaf. From this, we actually can see here that value is going to be equal to 1 over the price level. 1 over the price, right? 1 over 1 is still 1. 2, I got half a loaf. My value was 1 over 2. 4, I got 1 over 4, 1 over 4. So I actually can show value as a price variable. Which is something that we had to have in our money market, right? The money market over here has to be having a price variable as an axis. I can then come over to my mystery axes here, the one that I circled, and I can show this as 1 over PL, or if you just want to write value, that's fine. Which then, you know what, I'm going to take this whole graph, I'm just going to put it over here so I can make it bigger. We can see some changes. So it'll give you a second too if you haven't written that graph out yet. I actually think I'm going to do 2 of them. So 2 of just this graph over here that we had. Downward sloping money demand, downward sloping money demand. I'm just going to have money supply again, just kind of right in the middle. It's just easier that way. Money supply. Now we are showing 1 over the price level, or the value. I'm just going to write value right here. So again, it's you know where I got it from. I got to put money supply in over here. And then for my other axes here, you know, again, you can calculate these out. You know, you can calculate out a value of whatever that is mathematically. You can show that mathematical value. You can represent it as variables. You can put it as, you know, 1 over PL1. That's fine. You can write VM. I don't care. Any which way, whatever is easier for you. I might kind of just erase that just to make it a little bit smoother. And now let's make some changes real quick. So in our first one, let's go ahead and increase the money supply. If we increase the money supply, I don't think that there's any shock here, right? There's the risk of inflation. More money in the country, maybe, well, maybe its value falls. In fact, actually, that's what we're going to see. Right, as I increase the money supply to MS2 in some Q2 amount, you'll notice that what happened to the value, right? If this 1 over PL represents value, the value of our money went down. This distance between PL1 and PL2 actually represents inflation. It's even calculatable, right? Because I have 2 price levels. I have 2, you know, like price index, PL2 minus PL1 divided by PL1, right? I could even calculate out that inflation as this physical distance. Again, it actually occupies a space on the graph. We could go over here too and say, well, what if money supply, out of the way, what if money supply falls? Well, money supply falls, shifts our money supply to the left, Q goes to Q2, and you'll notice 1 over PL2, the value in this case has risen. Now, this is where we're going to take a simplification of this. We are going to assume that this is deflation. Now, again, we said deflation probably isn't happening. It's super rare. We don't see it. Yeah, true. That's probably some representation of disinflation relative to purchasing power. That would be nice and formal. I don't care. We can call it deflation. But yes, true in actuality, this increase in value is probably disinflation as a ratio to purchasing power. That's a lot to write, and sometimes I think that confuses people. So I'm just going to be simple and just say, hey, this distance, again, this physical value right in here, we're just going to call it deflation. So by utilizing this twist, if you will, on our money market, it's still a money market, but by using this twist on it, we actually contract value. So watch for some of those keywords and questions that might ask. If I'm ever asking you to show me in the money market inflation or deflation, it has to be on the value model. Clearly, if I give you price levels, if I say value, look for some of those key indicators because the interior of the graph is exactly the same. The shifts in the graph are exactly the same. Money demand still shifts the same in both money markets, right? Money supply still shifts the same in both money markets. So watch for some of those key points. Okay, we've filled the board, so I'll let a pause for a board video and then we'll pick up.